In Spanish, verbs have an infinitive form, which is sort of the neutral form to do the verb, and we can also take off that ending and change it for something else to say we do the verb in the present tense or we did the verb in the past tense, and we can use the infinitive to talk about going to do the verb, about the near future tense, I'm going to do this. So let's look at how verbs work using the topic of holidays. Now first I could say durante mis vacaciones, during my holidays, and I can say this whether it's like last year during my holidays I swam in the sea, or normally during my holidays I swim in the sea, or next year during my holidays I'm going to swim in the sea. So we can look at all three tenses, past, present and the future, and we can also look at like during my holidays I like to swim in the sea. So the first verb we're going to look at is tomar el sol, to sunbathe. There's also the verb broncearse, like to bronze yourself, but let's go with this one, tomar el sol, to literally to take the sun. Tomar is the verb to take, so we can use this in other contexts as well. This is what I mean by the infinitive, is it always ends in R. There are three kind of infinitive forms, AR verbs, ER verbs and IR verbs, but they all end in R. So if you see a verb that ends in R, it's the to do the verb, to take or to go or to swim or to eat. It's the to form, the neutral form. It means it doesn't have a person, nobody's doing the action. It doesn't have a time frame or a tense. To sunbathe, it's not I sunbathed, he will sunbathe, it's got no person, no tense. That's what we mean by an infinitive. To sunbathe. Now I can use infinitives for lots of things. Me gusta tomar el sol. I like to sunbathe. I don't need to change anything here, just me gusta tomar el sol. Me encanta tomar el sol. I love to sunbathe. I'm going to sunbathe. Voy a tomar el sol. Voy a tomar el sol. I'm going to sunbathe. And I could also use suelo. I usually tomar el sol. Suelo tomar el sol. But if I want to just put this into the present tense, I sunbathe. So normally, normalmente, I sunbathe. First I need to take off the infinitive ending, and then I need to add an O. Tomo el sol, I sunbathe, yeah? We're changing the AR for an O, and we can do this with all regular AR verbs to get from the to do the verb to I do the verb in the present tense. If I want to say I sunbathed, what we do in English is we add a D, or if it didn't already have an E, we'd add ED to make past tense with a regular verb. In Spanish, it's all about the verb endings. These tell us who's doing the verb, but also when. Has it been done in the past? Will it be done in the future? Is it normally done? So I need to change this now. Tomé el sol, I sunbathed. So this one is for the present tense, I do the verb. This is for the past tense, I did the verb. So with something like bailar, to dance. Bailar, to dance, me gusta bailar, I like to dance. Bailo, I dance. Bailé, I danced. And the accent is really important because it changes. Baile, un baile is a dance, but bailé is I danced. So it kind of changes the pronunciation. It's the accentuated or emphasized syllable, the one with the tilde, with the accent. Now another useful verb, pasear, to stroll, to go for a nice leisurely walk. Pasear por la playa, literally to stroll along the beach. Now I can use the infinitive, like I explained before, for lots of different things. You can use it for an opinion, like me gusta pasear por la playa. Whenever I use a phrase like me gusta, I like, me encanta, I love, odio, I hate, me fascina, it fascinates me, me interesa, I'm interested in it, then I always need to use the infinitive. It's a really common mistake for people to say me gusta paseo or me gusta voy instead of me gusta ir. Remember, after me gusta, it's always going to be either a thing, like a noun, or if it's a verb, it needs to be the infinitive, ending in AR, ER, or IR. If I want to say I usually, I could say normalmente paseo, so I could use the present tense, paseo, but there's also this verb soler. Suelo kind of translates as I usually. Suelo pasear por la playa. I usually stroll along the beach durante mis vacaciones, during my holidays. And for the future, there's a couple of different future tenses, but this is what we call the near future tense. The verb to go, this one's conjugated, so boy, I go, a, to, so literally I go or I'm going to stroll along the beach. Voy a plus an infinitive. I'm going to do this verb. Voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van. If you're not familiar with ir, the verb to go in the present tense, it's crucial to unlocking the near future tense. So that's something you could have a look at. I've got on my YouTube channel lots of videos about all the different tenses. So thinking about the verb conjugation, if I want to take the verb pasear, to stroll, and I want to say I stroll, just like we did with tomar, can you remember what we did? We took off the AR and we added a letter O, paseo. All of the verbs AR, ER, IR, all of the regular ones, it's O for the I form. But for different people, if I want to say we stroll, paseamos, I'm changing it to amos, that one's slightly different. If it were an ER verb, then I would need to look at the ER verb endings. So it's important first to work out, is it an AR, an ER, or an IR verb? And then we add that ending. So can you remember what it was for the past tense? If I want to say I strolled along the beach in the past tense. It wasn't an O, we still take off the AR, but instead of adding O, I had to add an E accent, paseé. Now what we get when we have two vowels together in Spanish, we pronounce them both separately, like the verb leer, to read. So this isn't pasí, like if it were English, we'd kind of just make an E, an elongated E sound. It's paseé, paseé. And again, this is the accentuated one, so it's not paseé, it's paseé. The tilde, the accent tells me this is the emphasized syllable. Paseé por la playa. Another holiday activity, nadar en el mar, to swim in the sea. We could also say nadar en la piscina, to swim in the pool. Another AR verb, it's regular, so it's going to follow the exact same pattern. Nadar, to swim. Nado, I swim, present tense. Nadé, I swam, past tense. What we call the preterite tense, or the simple past. Because we've got I swam, I have swum, I had swum, I used to swim. Different past tenses, but this is the preterite. We use it for completed actions that happen in a specific moment in the past. So if I said, yesterday I swam, ayer nadé. Last week I swam, la semana pasada nadé. El año pasado, durante mis vacaciones en Grecia, last year during my holidays in Greece, nadé en el mar, I swam in the sea. I'm going to change things up slightly and look at an ER verb, a regular ER verb. So, comer en restaurantes, to eat in restaurants. Comer is obviously the verb to eat. It's our infinitive, our to do the verb form. We can do loads of stuff. Just knowing this phrase, we can do loads of things. Me gusta comer, I like to eat. Me encanta comer, I love to eat. Voy a comer, I'm going to eat. Vamos a comer, we're going to eat. Suelo comer, I usually eat. Suelo comer en restaurantes típicos cuando estoy en Italia. I normally eat, or I usually eat, in typical restaurants when I'm in Italy. In the I form of the present tense, it still goes to an O. So I take off the ER in this case rather than the AR, and I add an O. But if I wanted to say we eat, with nadar, to swim, it would have been nadamos. It's amos ending. Because it's an ER, it's comemos. It's got an emos ending. If it were an IR verb, it would be emos. So some of the other endings are slightly different, amos, emos, emos. But with the I form, it's always an O ending. And even the irregulars, like soy, I am, you can see it's got an O in it. Tengo, it gets a G out of nowhere, but it's still got an O on the end. So O tells us with verbs that it's in the I form. A lot of beginner learners can get a little bit confused because they learn that O's are for masculine, A's are for feminine when they're talking about nouns and adjectives. Like bolígrafo ends in O, it's a masculine noun, so it would be negro, a black one, rather than negra. And we've got like una regla, a ruler. Una regla ends in A, so it's feminine, so it's una regla blanca, not blanco. Un bolígrafo negro, una regla blanca. And then when we start talking about verb endings, some of the girls think, oh, I need to say comma. Now, verbs are completely different. The endings are different. So O just means I do the action. It has nothing to do with gender. Because this is an ER verb, in the past tense, it is going to be different. So remember, for AR verbs, we added E accent. If I want to say, I ate, in the past tense, I need an I accent. Comí en restaurantes. This is going to be the same for ER verbs and for IR verbs. Exactly the same ending, but it's different for AR verbs. Tomar, tomé. Comer, comí. Escribir, escribí. I wrote. Now, jugar, to play. On a family holiday, this is something we might do. Jugar al vóley playa, to play beach ball. Durante mis vacaciones me encanta jugar al vóley playa. During my holidays, I love to play beach ball. In the present tense, it goes to juego al vóley playa. Juego, it gets this E. Normally we'd take off the AR, we'd add an O. That would give us jugo, which means juice in a lot of Latin America. Sumo or zumo in Spain. So maybe that's why it gets an E. I don't know the exact reason. But this E is a little bit irregular. Irregular just means it breaks the pattern. It doesn't quite follow the rules or the common patterns in the language. So I play is juego. In the past tense, it also has a bit of a spelling change. I played is jugué. Now, where is this U coming from? This I can explain. If this was regular, if it were regular, I take off the AR, gives me jug, spelled like jug, and I'd add an E. But what happens with the letter G? When it's followed by an O, it's a hard sound, like in jugar, g-g-g, jugar, juego, jugué. Go, yeah, like gol, when someone scores a goal. Ga, like gato. However, if it's followed by an E, or if it's followed by an I, it changes the pronunciation of the G. Think of the word people, gente, yeah? Gypsy, gitano. It's a ch sound, it's a bit like the letter J. So what's the issue here? If I kept the spelling regular, the sound would be really irregular. Jugar, juego, jugué, it doesn't sound like jugar. So actually this spelling change, it makes it look a bit irregular, but it makes it sound the way it should. We're protecting, this U is protecting this G sound. So we're not actually hearing this U. We're not saying jugue, we're just saying jugué. If I want to hear the U, what we then need to do, basically GU followed by an E or an I, it's just protecting the hard G sound, like in the word guitar, guitarra. I'm not saying guitarra, it's just, here the U is just protecting the G sound, so it doesn't become ch, guitarra. If I want to hear the U, then I'd need to use this letter. There's the word vergüenza, for example, shame, vergüenza or vergüenza. So here I'm hearing vergüenza or vergüenza. So sometimes you'll see that as well. It's a little bit complicated, but just to know that the letter G, it changes a bit. So jugar in the past tense, I need to put that U there, jugué, to protect the hard G sound. And again, on my YouTube channel, there's an in-depth look at Spanish pronunciation. Things like the different letter combinations, the accents, all of that. You can find an in-depth video if that's something you want to delve a bit deeper into. Now the verb visitar, remember V's, it's not like a V sound, I'm not putting my teeth on my lips, V, I'm saying visitar, it's more like a B. Visitar los monumentos, I could say visitar los museos, to visit the museums. Visitar la playa, to visit the beach. How would I say I love to visit the museums? Me encanta visitar los museos. How would I say I'm going to visit? Just I'm going to visit. Voy a visitar, and again we've got voy, also starting with a V, not voy. Voy a visitar, I'm going to visit. Vamos a visitar, we're going to visit. Now have a think, how would I take this verb, to visit, and say I visit in the present tense? Visito. Now have a think, how would I put this into the past tense? I visited, the simple past, the preterite. Visité. We're back to that E accent that we had with tomar, with jugar, what was the other one we had? Pasear. And now let's mix things up a bit further and talk about a really, really highly irregular verb, but one of the most useful verbs, one of the highest frequency verbs in the Spanish language, the verb ir, which hopefully we know means to go. Ir de compras, literally to go of like shopping, it means to go shopping, ir de compras. I could say, durante mis vacaciones me gusta ir de compras. During my holidays, I like to go shopping. If I want to say I go shopping, now here, if we treat this like an IR verb, and I take off the IR, I'm left with nothing. It just doesn't work. It's a really irregular verb. How do you say I go? It has nothing to do with ir. Do you remember? Voy, remember. Voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van. The verb to go in the present tense. I go, you go, he goes, she goes, we go, and so on. In the past tense, it's also really weird, really irregular. So this doesn't look anything like this, and the past tense doesn't look like any of these. So I went in the past tense is fui. So fui de compras, I went shopping. Voy de compras, I go shopping. Me gusta ir de compras, I like to go. If we forget about shopping, which is quite a niche thing, compared to the vast possibilities of the verb to go, we can do a lot more with this. Me gusta ir a Francia, I like to go to France. Este año voy a Italia, this year I'm going to Italy. Or I could say voy a ir a Italia, I'm going to go to Italy. El año pasado fui a Grecia, last year I went to Greece. Sacar fotos, this one is something in Spain they say sacar fotos. You can also say tomar fotos, like in Colombia people might say that. In Puerto Rico, as we know with the new Bad Bunny album, they say tirar fotos. Tirar in a lot of places means to throw something in the bin, but in Puerto Rico, tirar fotos, to take photos. So depending on where you're speaking Spanish or who you're speaking to, you'll hear different verbs being used as the verb to take photos. But I want to look at this verb because it's going to teach us something else about the phonics of Spanish, about the letter combinations, a bit like with jugar and jugué, how we learned about the G with the E's being different to G with an O or an A, for example. So with sacar, something similar happens. It's quite regular in the present tense, so I take off the AR, add an O, and I get saco. Saco fotos. Sacar literally means to take out. I guess you're extracting a photo from the reality around you. I could say saco la basura, I take the rubbish out, I take the trash out. So saco fotos, I take photos. With tomar, tomo fotos. With tirar, tiro fotos. If you want to speak, more Colombian or Puerto Rican Spanish. With the past tense, I normally, if this were regular, I would take off the AR and I would add the accent. But the C is a bit like the G. We've got a hard C sound. Sacar, saco, k. Here, think of this word pig, cerdo or cerdo. So in Spain, a lot of people would say cerdo, like a TH sound. And in Latin America and in the Canary Islands, cerdo. But either way, it's what we call a soft C sound. K, s, or th. It changes the sound. The same with, you might know this actually without knowing you know this, because how do I say this? Cinco or cinco. Nobody says quinco. So we know this. The ending, this is actually a great example because we've got two letter C's, but here it's a soft C, here it's a hard C, and it's to do with what comes next. So this word, sacar, saco, sase or safe, it doesn't sound like sacar. So it looks regular, but it sounds irregular. And it's always you speak a lot more than you write and read. If you think of any given day, you use a lot more words in oral form than you do in written form, so it's more important that it sounds right. Which is why it goes to saque. Sacar, saco, saque. Sounds perfect. Just looks a little bit weird, but remember the QU also gives us that hard C sound. Think of the word que. It's almost like a K sound, yeah? Kicking K, as they say in a lot of primary schools, or at least used to. So sake, QU. This is another common mistake that people try and pronounce the QU like queen in English. It doesn't make a qu sound, it's just like the letter K, sake. So this, again, is protecting the pronunciation. It's protecting that hard C sound. Before you go, I'm going to show you some really useful sentence builders that you can use to put some of this vocabulary into nice, long, detailed, structured sentences. I'm going to show you one for the present tense, the past tense, and the future tense. Feel free to take a screenshot, save it to your camera roll. This is a resource I put together that my students find really useful, and hopefully you will also find it really useful for your Spanish learning. Let's start with the present tense sentence builder. The idea is to take an option from every column. Me gusta ir de vacaciones a, choose a country, y suelo, and I usually, and then an activity using our verbs in the infinitive form. A location, or, which is just the letter or, is just the letter o. And then we've got the same verbs, or some of the same verbs, and some other ones in the I form. In a moment, see if you can put together a nice structured sentence using this sentence builder. I'll try and keep this steady so you can take a screenshot. You can pause it, try writing your sentence in the comments if you want. Now let's look at the future tense one. So here we've got el año que viene, next year, el verano que viene, next summer, para mis próximas vacaciones, for my next holidays. Instead of voy a, we've got voy a ir a, I'm gonna go to, I'm going to go to. We could also say iré, I will go, but this is the near future tense. Once again, see if you can put together a sentence using that sentence builder. And finally, one for the past tense. So we've got el año pasado, last year, el verano pasado, last summer, hace 2 años, 2 years ago. So we say hace, and then a time frame is time frame ago. Obviously, the orders kind of swap round on that. The ago goes at the end in English, at the beginning in Spanish, hace or hace. Fui a, so remember, ir is a really irregular verb. Voy in the present tense, voy a if we want to use the future, and fui for the past tense. Visité, careful with the pronunciation, not visite. Visité, country, y, and then here we've got those same verbs, but in the past tense, in the preterite tense. Same locations, and again, those verbs in the preterite tense. So once again, put together a sentence, and then you will be able to talk about holidays in a structured way in 3 different tenses.